Hello everyone, and welcome on back to Professor O's David Lynch 1001. Now in today's lesson, we will be covering 1986's Blue Velvet. With this work, we make a turn right back into the unsettling art that David Lynch is known for, particularly the horrors we haven't seen the likes of since Eraserhead. Yes, this is a work that, while displaying a duality and an underlying light, does uncover some very disturbing territory. So please see it if you haven't already. Be forewarned. And hell, if you've seen it already, please see it again. It is one of the most rewatchable films I know of. I've seen it about 10 times. It is one of those films that has so many layers to peel back, so many layers of analysis. I've seen so many people give their own takes. I know there's this one analysis of the film that goes 7 seconds at a time. That's how much there is here. But there is also so much darkness. Yes, my friends, now it's dark. Especially after David Lynch's adaptation of Dune. Yes, his attempt at adapting the Frank Herbert sci-fi classic did not go as he intended. He had to compromise on his vision, resulting in a critical and box office bomb. He was not quite a fit for the role of a big-time Hollywood director, and that would be seen in such little quirks as him asking one of his actors about surgery to pull off a sort of effect where smoke would be exiting from his mouth. He posited the idea of having a hole cut into his mouth so that a tube could be fed through and smoke would come right out, giving a more convincing effect. But even if something like that were to actually happen, I'm sure that this sort of film would not define Lynch moving forward. Even if he was locked into a contract where he were to write and adapt Dune Messiah, it's not really where I think his interests must have lied. I mean, he was the type of man to turn down adapting George Lucas's Return of the Jedi, the third of the original trilogy of Star Wars movies. But he takes all this, he learns his lessons, and he knows that there's nowhere to go from failure but up. He moves on, he takes the star actor Kyle MacLachlan, and he breathes in some ideas that he develops. They all start from one song from the early 1960s. Not a rock and roll song, not like any of the typical songs of the time. Instead, it's a slow and steady love ballad that, while Lynch didn't originally like at first, speaks to him in later points and drives this film at large. I'll let him explain just a little bit in this excerpt from the documentary Mysteries of Love.
It started with Bobby Vinton's song, Blue Velvet, which came out in 1964, but I started getting these ideas from this song of a mystery that would take place in a small city in quiet neighborhoods. Then I had this desire to sneak into a girl's room and watch her throughout a night, and possibly while watching I'd see a clue to a mystery. And then I got this idea for finding an ear in a field, and this ear would be an opening into another world. And then I got a lot of other ideas like this, but fragments that finally hooked themselves together and formed enough of a story so that I could add in the missing pieces. But this took a long time. I've written 4 drafts of the script and over several years, before I finally got it together to film it.
Yes, in fact, Blue Velvet was one of those ideas that was floating around in Lynch's head, even in the years working on Eraserhead. Unlike one of his scripts, Ronnie Rocket, which he had been working on and off, and repeatedly trying to make different drafts of, this one actually got made, and we'll talk about Ronnie Rocket later on when we cover the unrealized projects of David Lynch. For now, we discuss a realized project that does take its time, and only after De Laurentiis Entertainment Group sees one of its biggest flops do they understand, well, we should take our director of choice, David Lynch, who is a great friend of De Laurentiis and strike a sort of deal. And it's not your typical deal. It's not one written down in paper. It's simply a handshake, because if it were anything more, every director would go clamoring for it. What is the prize at hand? Well, it's Final Cut. It's that thing that Lynch coveted but couldn't yet ascertain from a production of the 1984 Dune adaptation, but he does get it here. The charisma that Lynch carries rub it off on De Laurentiis, so much so that they get along and they carry on, even if Lynch didn't get to make what he really thought he could. And for once, De Laurentiis admits to being a meddler, because one of his greatest flaws as a producer was meddling in the project and sometimes hindering it in what it could actually be. He admits to even slaughtering the film in the editing bay, among many other things, but it is Blue Velvet that gives Lynch the sort of permission to express himself on the world stage in such a way that it is a duty that really speaks to Lynch. He takes that and he runs with it, and he knows that the kindness that De Laurentiis had offered him is so important to where he ended up. So we can see Lynch and his wife at the time, Emily Stoffel, attending the funeral of Dino De Laurentiis right here in this photograph. It's sad to know that Lynch had to see some person like that pass away, but I mean, unfortunately, even Lynch's autobiography shows that Dino De Laurentiis wasn't the best of people. Please uncover that on your own time. This story and many other stories in Lynch's whole career is full of digressions, so it's the name of the game. You go ahead and find it on your own terms. Instead, we focus on what this deal signified, and it's this change in scale. It's in so many ways what many would see as a downgrade. Lynch had gone from this budget of around $40 to $42 million to a $6 million budget, and his salary was cut in half. And he would originally see Blue Velvet as having a 4-hour-long cut in the editing bay, and it was said to have even worked at that length, but they would have to have that as well. The one stipulation that De Laurentiis would say is the film would need to be 2 hours flat. He did not want the audiences to be too bored. Where Dune was 2 hours and 17 minutes exactly, because any more and they would have lost a screening per day, Blue Velvet was just that length because that's what De Laurentiis saw as the appropriate length for a noir. There are so many scenes left on the cutting room floor, and we don't have access to all of them. Only around 45 minutes worth per the Blue Velvet The Lost Footage film, which you can check out in your own time. That is a staggering amount of work I still want to see someday, just like some of the work from Eraserhead that'll never come to light. Anywho, we get what we get, and that is Lynch really getting to show his expression in what he wants to say about his life growing up in the suburbs and the underlying darkness, and how it can sort of contrast with Philadelphia life and his understanding of the world as it grows and grows throughout his development and his own sort of coming of age. It inspires the journey that our main character goes on, and Lynch gets to oversee every part of that journey because he can tell every one of his friends who worked on the film what's what. Even an old associate of his, Alan Splett, gets to return and do sound, though he would end up leaving the project early because Frank Booth and other very horrific parts of the film would get to him so much that he would say, I quit, I can't do this anymore, it's just too much. And Lynch says, holy smokes, Al, and just lets him go. But even still, there is this film that Lynch is so proud of. He's happier, and it really ignites his love for film all over again. And with Blue Velvet's coming to fruition, we wouldn't see Lynch have this permission to give the films he puts out into the world his true signature. And with that whole true Lynchian quality, we wouldn't have that without the cast, and it's a stacked cast. We've got the breakout performance of two actors. That would be Laura Dern and Isabella Rossellini. To start, Laura Dern was a 17-year-old girl by the time she had met with Lynch for the first time, pursuing the part of the sweet and innocent Sandy Williams. Now, that was a step into not just her first role, but a pretty prominent role that would take some acting chops and like showing a lot of sadness in seeing how Jeffrey would treat her in the third act. So she is to be admired for that, even at such an early age. She did have a mother who was an actor. That would be Diane Ladd. With Wild at Heart, Diane Ladd would actually go on to play an in-universe mother to Laura Dern and give quite a profound and loud performance herself. But here, we see her play a sort of second detective alongside Jeffrey Beaumont. Of course, that is Kyle MacLachlan's character. And after the film had wrapped, they would still carry that sort of chemistry, and here they are dating just right after the film had released. Speaking of people that got to dating after the film's release, we've got David Lynch and Isabella Rossellini. Yes, David Lynch was so enamored by not only Isabella Rossellini's singing, performance, all of it, he decided to date Isabella Rossellini and carry her on in a couple future projects. Just like Laura Dern, they would be in Wild at Heart together, but also Isabella Rossellini would appear in a couple of like minor projects of Lynch's here and now again, even prospectively being a character called Josie Packard in Twin Peaks before she was unable to take the part due to scheduling conflicts. But all three of these actors on the left side of the screen, they reappear in Lynch's filmography, but not Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper gives his only collaboration with Lynch as he plays the villain to the film. That is Frank Booth. Dennis Hopper would be so bold as to say, "I am Frank Booth," when Lynch was hesitant to hire him. Lynch was only so hesitant to hire Dennis Hopper. What a Freudian slip. Because Dennis Hopper was dealing with so many problems to do with drug and alcohol addiction, so many people had turned to Lynch and said, "Oh, no, you can't hire Dennis. He's too much of a wild card. He'd been doing too many crazy things on film sets and outside of the film world that many people didn't think he could be trusted." But so much of that experience of living a really dangerous life on the edge would go into informing where Frank comes from in that performance, that drug kingpin who is also addicted to his own mysterious inhalant. Dennis Hopper was in fact the one to change Lynch's mind from that inhalant being helium of all things. Yes, they were going to make that not a drug like amyl nitrate or what have you that would stimulate him in a sexual manner, but just something like helium, which wouldn't provide that much of a high, but I guess would just make him a little baby, which would then fit some of the Freudian theming. I don't necessarily know what Lynch was thinking. Dennis Hopper thought it would have been interesting in hindsight, but all in all, I'm glad we got the version we got, because I believe that Blue Velvet would have been made a lot more of a joke than it was to the 1986 audiences. But so much of the film is built on moments of humor to carry us through, and two characters who can help that is the entourage that Frank Booth has, made up of Paul, he'll tell you his name, we've got Raymond, and we've got Hunter, who isn't pictured. That's because Hunter does not appear again in Lynch's filmography. I say Hunter both to refer to the actor and the character, because yes, they share the same first name, but here we need to really hone in on one of Lynch's favorites, that is Jack Nance. He brings a sort of character that is not the standoffish and unconfident character that we saw in Eraserhead, but some sort of madness that is a little reminiscent of Nefud, a minor character within Dune. It's just one of those things that needs to be iterated. Jack Nance appears in almost every Lynch film before Lynch passes away. Not Lynch passes away, but Nance passes away under mysterious circumstances right before Lost Highway gets released out into the public. But Brad Dourif would have his final film with Lynch here. Not for any reasons I can surmise. I just know that Brad Dourif would make a turn to more horror films. In fact, he would be the actor behind the serial killer Charles in the Chucky franchise. Yes, the evil voice possessing the Chucky dolls throughout all those movies. Some interesting trivia as we carry on to other stars. Really fascinating thing is that while Dean Stockwell has one scene in Blue Velvet, he really is the star. He is one suave, excuse my language, motherfucker. He is, of course, the best friend of Frank Booth that we can see in all of Blue Velvet. That's Ben. He's dressed in sort of drag and performing in lip sync in the scene where he sings what Frank calls the candy-colored clown, but is actually In Dreams by Roy Orbison. Yes, Roy Orbison will come back, so I do need to note that. There is Frances Bay to Dean Stockwell's right. Dean Stockwell, I should also mention, does not appear in Lynch's work following, but they do stay friends. But Frances Bay. Man, this is her first film with Lynch. She plays Aunt Barbara to Jeffrey Beaumont. And she doesn't have that many scenes, but she's fantastic and continues to offer surrealism to other Lynch projects, namely Twin Peaks, a minor role in Wild at Heart, but Twin Peaks where she shines. There's even some of her in Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. So we'll have to see how that all pans out, but rest in peace to both these actors. They really made their mark. And none of these actors would really come into the fray if it weren't for casting directors. Of course, our casting director of note is Johanna Ray. Yes, we can see Johanna Ray doing casting direction for every following Lynch project. And their method was pretty simple, yet it worked. Johanna Ray would just take out a headshot of whatever actor or actress that Lynch was looking for, and Lynch would sit there and say, "No, it's not it. No, that's the one." And time after time, that would give him a star-studded cast. That would give him exactly the characters he was looking for. So, of course, Johanna Ray can be seen right here with the backdrop of the Twin Peaks The Return poster, like red carpet words. Dwayne Dunham is another person that would work on Twin Peaks. He would be the editor for this film, edit with Lynch a couple times, do some directing for Twin Peaks. In general, he's done a lot, so much so that you can see him with a background of Disney Channel original movies. Yes, he'd worked on a couple, most notably Halloween Town. Very interesting trivia right there, too. Frank Silva, we've mentioned him before. Every time I see him, it gives shivers down my spine. And for those who know, boy, you know. But just got him again with his little signature. As we can see, he works on Twin Peaks. And something that goes right into Twin Peaks is the two musicians on the right. Angelo Badalamenti would be the composer for this film and every Lynch film following, and Julie Cruz in the middle would be the singer that Lynch would feature in a couple of his projects. Now, this is where they fully meet. Angelo Badalamenti is hired onto the project to help Isabella Rossellini sing her own rendition of Blue Velvet. She had grown up around a version of Blue Velvet, it was in a different key at a different tempo, so they had to do an entirely different arrangement for her, and Angelo Badalamenti is to thank for that. He worked with her in the studio, going from a point where she did not want to sing at all until eventually warming up to the fact and sipping together little vocal takes until we've got what we hear in the film, that truly beautiful song that comes in twice. It's all thanks to Angelo Badalamenti, who even appears as the pianist in the scene where we see Dorothy Vallon singing her songs. She has this little moment near the end that has these lyrics which are totally unique to the film. This blue star idea, all of that is cooked up by these guys. It's my favorite part of the song. It's got this menacing beat to it, and it's got sort of this jazziness, which Angelo Badalamenti would be so good at. He would infuse it with Twin Peaks. He would infuse it in little bits and pieces around their work, and they would even do some jazz work together, Lynch and Badalamenti, on a solo record called Thought Gang. One of the things that we will touch upon in our next lesson as we focus on the music that Lynch has created. And one of the first things that I can count on Lynch doing with music is writing the lyrics to a song called Mysteries of Love that appears in the third act of this film. There's a little leitmotif that carries throughout, but it is only there because Lynch could not secure the rights to a song he was literally and metaphorically married to. That is the song to the Siren by This Mortal Coil. It's their rendition of a Tim Buckley original, and it is just so floaty, shoegazy, beautiful in every way. And Lynch eventually gets to use it in Lost Highway, but for now, he does not have the money in his budget to get that into his work. So he does what he can, and he works on creating a supplementary tune, and that is Mysteries of Love. He just scrawls his own little lyrics on a napkin, and he gives it to Badalamenti, who says, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And Lynch replies, "Just make it like the ocean, just make it like the wind, just make it go on and on, make it float." All those things. And damn, Badalamenti delivers on that. So he takes his friend that he knows from singing at a nightclub. That would, of course, be Julie Cruz. And they work together on one of the first tracks I can point to as dream pop. Yes, one of the things that Lynch would help to create is the genre of dream pop, just from making a supplemental to a shoegaze song. They help in creating a subgenre all their own. You can thank him for bands such as Beach House. It's really Lynch that starts all of that, like Wave, incidentally. Maybe not him in specific, but he is a key touchstone. And so we will see when these three come together and make an album called Floating into the Night. That's to be seen. But for now, we also have to thank someone named Patricia Norris. I feel immense regret for not talking about Patty Norris even one bit during our little lesson on The Elephant Man, because she was the costume designer for that work. She is what sold that period piece vibe. She's not only known for that film, she was a costume designer on Scarface, 12 Years a Slave, future Lynch projects, Lost Highway, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, even The Straight Story. But she began on Mel Brooks projects, High Anxiety, History of the World Part 1, and through that, they have their meeting, and she also becomes a production designer on a couple of Lynch's works. Some of those previous ones, Lost Highway, Fire Walk with Me, Twin Peaks, and Wild at Heart, of course. Here, she does her first work of production design. She's right there in the middle of this photo on set, as Lynch does in directing with Francis Bay, and Priscilla Pointer, Kyle MacLachlan, taking in the scene, seeing all the little details. She does bring so much humanity to these spaces and help to flesh out this world for all to see. It is a really beautiful set of images we get just from looking at rooms. So much of Dorothy Vallon's apartment we can use as a point to thank her. So yes, Patty Norris, you will not be forgotten. And her next work would just be a year later, 2 years later, as Lynch would work on The Cowboy and The Frenchman. There's so much to be seen, so giving my flowers to her and everyone who made Wilmington, North Carolina turn into Lumberton, USA. Yes, while Lumberton doesn't take place in any U.S. state in specific, it is emblematic of the U.S. wholesale. They do so many little things, including like a little radio jingle that appears a couple times to sell this idea of this industry town focused on its wood. Yes, wood. Oh boy, wood. Lynch loves all of that having to do with the trees and wood and what it means to an entire town that relies on it. Can kind of color Lumberton as being a sort of Rust Belt town, one of those towns who has its backbone on one specific focus. But that's only one such analysis we can do. What we can appreciate on any level, in any sense, is how the town of Wilmington has so many locations that are iconic in the eyes of cinema at large. The This Is It bar existed just as it did and gets put in so serendipitously, so brilliantly. The Slow Club gets transformed, and many times we can find these parts transformed. Even Deep River Apartments had a little bit of changing, which is really hilarious, as Deep River Apartments only has 6 floors in real life, but it does have 7 floors in the film, as Dorothy Valance lives on the 7th floor. Maybe a little bit of dream logic there. Something. It's curious. But there's so much that is quantifiably Lynch, because everything that we can hone in on in terms of little details, Lynch is a fan of. Things we wouldn't even see in the final cut, like this shot of Jeffrey on the phone, include this log that's completely iconographic for Lumberton and what it means as a town. It's a lumber town, so we've got a log on the police sign. That's Lynch too, and even this little pop-up with these fancy schmancy pine cones. Lynch. Who else would it be? He does everything. And he puts this out. He puts this out to mixed reception. Roger Ebert infamously gave this a 1 star, and I can probably see that giving a lot of people sour perception of the film, not wanting to see a film that does have that sort of energy around it. But the film endures. It starts in such a bright and cheery and almost artificial place with this idyll of America, and we go from that into a sequence of these beetles, of this undergrowth that is rotten and shows that what's festering underneath needs to be seen as these voyeurs dig deeper and deeper until we see at the end an artificial robin holding the bug in its mouth, completing this whole story, this whole arc that we've been on throughout this work. Fun fact, that robin we see here, that is a stuffed robin that flew into the window of a local school bus, and some kids were fascinated by it, so they picked it up, and Lynch got his hands on it, stuffed the bird, took some little strings, and did a little animation with it to create that look, sort of artificiality that maybe speaks to the fact that all is not right when we see the film resolve itself. There is still horror to be seen. Maybe that is what creates men such as Frank, the inability to truly atone for the darkness laying under America. But I speak on trodden ground, such trodden ground with Blue Velvet. There are so many people that can say so many things. So with this episode and Mulholland Drive, we'll probably have our shortest episodes, but many things still to note, especially things that Lynch himself says best. Here's this 1986 Canadian TV interview. He will speak on some things in sort of defense to this little hostile interviewer. I'll just let it rock. Oh, shoot.
I say
Thanks for holding in. There we go.
David, what is this movie about?
this movie, I say, is about the mysteries of darkness and love.
That's sort of hard to do, isn't it? I actually found the movie very disturbing.
It's a disturbing thing because it's a trip beneath a beautiful surface, but to a fairly uneasy interior of a small town.
Why did you want to do that? Why tell that story? Why is that so important to you?
I love to me, I grew up in the Northwest in a very, very beautiful world, and a lot of my life has been discovering this strange sickness, and it's got a fascination to me, and I love the idea of going into something and discovering a world and being able to watch it and experience it.
What do you mean by this strange sickness?
Well, there are things going on that are hidden, that we don't know about, but somehow we are drawn to at least wanting to see it, wanting to watch it maybe from a distance. And this film allows a person to become a voyeur and to see this and have an experience of a world that was hidden.
Do you
This film is built on a mystery that we hold on to, and even after it ends we have so many questions, providing what Lynch posits as room to dream. It lingers, and it gives us so much material to talk about it, so much material for questions that Lynch may not have all the answers to himself, but we stick through it in this way that gives us the idea of being a voyeur in on this mystery, and showing that all of us want to know the deep, dark secrets lying underneath. At some level, we're seeking that. So some strange things happen in the film, which we have no in-universe explanation. How did that TV get smashed in the apartment? Well, we could see in our world, Lynch is just smashing it himself, but we can only guess at what really is going on. There is a lot to really immerse ourselves in. A mysterious nature went into the writing of the film itself. Shostakovich's Symphony No. 15 in A major is a work that Lynch used whenever he was writing the script. He wanted it used in the film. He couldn't secure the rights, so he has Badalamenti kind of imitated in a lot of ways. It works because it gives that sort of noir feel in a very cheesy, Hollywoodish way, but it is so much of this mystery that keeps us going, even if there is a lot of dark feelings to be interfacing. It is neo-noir in its purest form, expounding upon noir themes that Lynch would really be a fan of. He would be big into films like Double Indemnity. They would work in tandem with Lynch's sensibilities of actual empathy of women in trouble, and more than just stereotypes of like femme fatale. There's this cycle of abuse that Dorothy Valens is like entrenched in. She becomes a very dark force when all she knows is darkness. Her son and husband are kidnapped, and she is forced into a sort of sexual slavery, and she is self-abusive and even abusive to Jeffrey Beaumont. She knows only hate after the love in her light has seeped away. There is love to be found after she escapes that, but there is this trauma that we know of even still, and only through Kyle MacLachlan's Jeffrey Beaumont holding the blue velvet in his mouth and experiencing the pain that Frank Booth can put upon him does he see how dark this world can be. He really understands this world a little more, but it's not just that darkness, it's a world of light and dark. It is a film that explores these multitudes. We've got Sandy Williams and we've got Frank Booth. We've got this dichotomy, this yin and this yang, this idea of light in the dark and dark in the light. There's so much more of that in Blue Velvet, but I honestly think of Blue Velvet, or so much of that in Twin Peaks than there is in Blue Velvet specifically. Pardon me. But here, we know so much already of the modus operandi, and we see a lot of, I guess, hope from this scene of speaking about a dream of what could come true after very, very confrontational moments of rape and like excess abuse. But we've even got the scenes of like humor found within that descent into the night out that Frank and Jeffrey go out on. There's so much, and through this I posit that Blue Velvet is kind of an act 1 in a story that really gets told in acts 2, 3, maybe even 4 throughout Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, and Twin Peaks The Return. Something to be understood even more when we find out what that could mean for it, but it's an unresolved story in so much that Jeffrey doesn't get to confront his own darkness, that side of himself that he may not be willing to really see, and that's that detective or a pervert aspect, something that we may see a version of himself embody in the future is more multitudes. Little foreshadowing. This is foreshadowing for so many more things. It's fire and it's wood, and it's sinking deeper and deeper. It's the different senses it's hearing. It's so much. It's what we can see in all these little scenes. There's bonus scenes that provide even more, like this one of them in the Slow Club watching opening acts before Dorothy Valens comes out, like this dog eating a bowl of kibble next to a Confederate style anthem playing on in the background, and it's just the only thing on the stage except a little LED, well, not LED, neon light of a bunny above it. Bunnies and dogs will come back into Lynch's work. They're another point of fascination. Animals, there's so much of what Lynch knows that he loves, so he puts them in his work. Maybe he doesn't know everything. In fact, almost 80% of the time he doesn't. We will grow to understand that he cannot explain everything, but what he can explain is some truths about our life. That it is not all dark, that it is not all light. We must know all the sides. And we must listen, because only through listening was Sandy able to hear what's going on through the bits and pieces of her father's office. Only through listening do we see the true meaning of something like Blue Velvet. And only through listening do we really get to where this film is trying to lead us towards. And that is still love. Love is what made this film, and love is what I have for it and carries me through talking to you about it all. Pieces of that go into the film are the dog Sparky, who appears in the opening sequence as that dog biting at the water fountain. It's a dog that Lynch loved for many years, a little mutt of his that he would care for and called one of his greatest loves in life. Photos of Mary Fisk playing with it are on the left, and a photo of Mary Fisk is at the top center. It's a little upsetting to mention Mary Fisk right now, because during this film, Lynch would really come to terms with his falling out of love with Mary Fisk, and as I said, he would start dating Isabella Rossellini. The feelings of infidelity in Lynch's life would be mirrored in his work. Life imitates art, and so on and so forth. But here, it's a little sad. I mean, of course, Isabella Rossellini and David Lynch's love would fade in a little bit of a strange way. Isabella Rossellini is, of course, Italian, and Italians are known for their great food. But in spite of that, Isabella Rossellini would be admonished for cooking in David Lynch's home. David Lynch would hate that. He said it would distract him from him trying to paint. All those smells would influence what he was trying to do in a way that he did not care for. And if sources like such that I have seen are to be believed, that's what led to their downfall. That's what led to their own relationship ending. But they still carried something so beautiful, a sort of muse and artist relationship. And it just starts with him really understanding her through the work, and Isabella Rossellini knowing that the depiction of Dorothy Valens is not just your typical damsel in distress. She has character, she has depth. And there is love for writing this. There is love for all of this. All of Dorothy Valens' character sprouts from a love for Wizard of Oz, Lynch's favorite film, or at least one of them. There's all of this diffusion of elements that we must pay attention to. So much to pay attention to, but a love for it will guide us through. My hyperfixation for it will keep me going. And we'll let the film linger even if it keeps us guessing. There are things you can check out if you want more Blue Velvet. There are 2 documentary films filmed by a German filmmaker named Peter Bratz. He made No Franken Lumberton first, then Blue Velvet Revisited second. They would be documentaries of sorts that were filmed on the set, as David Lynch had invited him to film whatever he wanted. And he works on these experimental depths, and it's best explained as a meditation on a movie instead of your normal documentation, to be seen on your own terms if you may like. Totally optional, just like the lost footage. It's excellent in my own opinion. It adds a lot to the film. I'll give a little link in the description to what I have easy access to. That includes an Internet Archive link to what is known as the Q2 Extended Fan Edit. That adds on 44 minutes to Blue Velvet and gives it far more of a lengthy noir feel. I really love it, and I hope you do too. Beyond that, we've got some historical recountings, like a YouTube video by Camcorder Camerin. That's how David Lynch made Blue Velvet. That can give you some more insight, more that we didn't quite cover here. Highly, highly recommend it, as well as for other David Lynch videos. But even if we did get to a film that can leave a sour taste in people's mouths and really signify where Lynch can actually depict horror in a real true sense, we've got a couple laughs. We've got more horror to come, especially with like Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me. But now, I'm just gonna give you some little bloopers, a little silliness to keep you going, and a thank you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next lesson. Have a great day.
Okay, Tiddlywinks. I'll see you later.
Okay, Tidbit. Bye.
Great. Okay. How was
Can
it,
you look
Fred?
down at the phone there for me, Laura?
Ellen Quayle? Okay, then, Hotshot. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, Rubbernecker. Bye.
Okie doke.
Oh, very good.
This is great chicken, Mrs. Williams.
I'm so pleased, Jeffrey. Eat up.
Cut.
Action.
Good to have you home, too. Come. Oh, smell the honeysuckle. Isn't it nice? Come on, Jeffrey.